Good morning, everybody. This is Phil Brown with New Hampshire Audubon, and I'm here on Facebook Live, and welcome to Ask a Naturalist. So hang on, and let's see if a few other folks are going to join. Feel free to send me your questions about what's going on in the natural world with birds and other types of critters as well. Give a comment now if you can, and I would appreciate any feedback here to see if this thing is working. I see a few of you have joined in. Good morning, thank you. All right. Good, we're going to get going in a few minutes, so just hang in there for a second. Okay, it's just about 10 o'clock now. There we go. Welcome, everybody. I see a few more people are joining in now. And we'll get going in just a minute. Can everybody hear me okay? Give a thumbs up or a like, or just send me a comment. And feel free to send me your questions too. I'm going to be answering. Oh, hey, Merrick. I'm going to be answering some questions about the natural world. So chime in with a question, and I'll get going right now. Okay. So good morning, everybody. I'm Phil Brown. I'm the Director of Land Management with New Hampshire Audubon, and I'm once again filling in for Becky Swamala this week. In fact, this is going to become a regular slot for me. Once a month, I'm going to be joining and bringing you updates about wildlife sanctuaries, what's going on in the natural world, talking about birds, as always, and answering your nature questions. So I am coming to you this morning from my home in Hancock in the southwestern part of the state. I'm looking out the window, as I usually am, and I imagine most of you who are on right now also have snow around you at the moment. So here's what it looks like out my window, and I'm sure that's a familiar scene for many of you this morning. So it's wonderful to see it. It is very much winter at this point, by the looks of it outside and by the feel of the temperature. So welcome to winter. A lot has changed since I last joined you about a month ago. So I'll talk about some of the happenings from the natural world and cover some other topics as well. So yeah, as far as the snow, I'm sure a lot of you are out there enjoying it, or maybe just watching it from the window. I haven't yet been out in it myself, which is unusual, but my kids have attested to it, that it looks and is very fun to be out there, and it's very cold, knee-deep snow for the children, so haven't gotten the official measurement yet, but it's good to have snow on the ground. It's very important for our natural world. It's insulating. It provides cover, believe it or not, for certain species, and we have many wildlife species that are adapted to the snow, from the ruffed grouse, which is a chunky kind of a game bird. It's a lot like a chicken, and ruffed grouse need this kind of puffy snow to insulate themselves in certain areas. Here's an image of the ruffed grouse, a little chunky chicken-like bird. And these guys are cryptically colored. They're brownish. They occur throughout much of the Northeast and the northern forests. And they like young forested areas, but they're really adapted for cold, snowy weather, and they need the snow cover in order to shelter them from danger and to insulate them. So they will actually fly right into the snow and stay there for a nice long time, and that's their little insulative blanket, sometimes for a day or more. They'll be bedded down in one little spot, waiting out a storm. So it's good that the snow isn't particularly crusty right now, at least. It's nice and powdery. That'll be good for the grouse. But anyway, we'll talk about birds in a little bit. It's what I call the most wonderful time of the year, and that's Christmas bird count season, of course. So that's how I mark my years now. It's a real landmark for me of the Christmas bird count season. I'll talk about what's going on with this tradition that started back in 1900, which is the longest continuously running community science program in the world. So it's a great way to track bird species populations, what's going on locally and regionally, and just making connections across the hemispheres too. I'll discuss snow and birds and other wildlife, give you a glimpse into some of the mammals in my own backyard, as I did once before. We'll also take a quick look at my backyard bird feeders on this snowy morning, seeing what's going on there. Love to hear what you are all seeing too, so chime in with comments about what's happening in your own backyard this morning. You'll notice a lot of feeder activity. If you're feeding birds the things they like to eat, they will be out there and really gorging things down this morning, trying to stay warm, the ones that are out anyway. We'll wrap up the raptor migration season very briefly. I'll mention a few sanctuary recommendations from New Hampshire Audubon's wildlife sanctuaries, and I'll give you a few last minute addition here, holiday shopping tips for the nature book lover. A little sneak preview here. Here we go. There's my pile of books that I'll be talking about. So stay tuned for that. And as usual with this format, I'll be answering some of your questions and talking about some of the seasonal happenings in the natural world. And I'm hoping the weather doesn't present any technology issues. Right now it's looking good. But definitely send me a comment if things go awry for whatever reason. And of course, questions are welcome in this feed at any point, so send those along, and I'll do my best to get to them. So, let's talk about winter. Winter is here, and it's not marked by the snow out the window or the temperature for me or the calendar date, but it's marked by the what we call the Christmas bird count period. This is an event that started in the year 1900 by 27 bird observers in 25 distinct Christmas bird count circles, areas that are 15 miles in diameter. A circle counting all the birds within that circle is the goal of the Christmas bird count. So it started that day as a real shift in an effort to focus on counting live birds rather than shooting and killing birds. That was more of the sport back before the 1900s, and then it did persist in some areas longer than that. However, that was the real shift in conservation world. National Audubon adopted this survey, and it's now the longest continuously running community science project in the world, going on since 1900. There are well over 2,000 distinct count circles across the country, the continent, across the world at this point, and over 80,000 individuals participate each year in this worldwide census. New Hampshire alone has 21 distinct count circles, which are at least partly, if not fully, within New Hampshire's borders. So this is a chance for bird watchers and bird enthusiasts, birders, if you will, to collaboratively search for and record all species and numbers of birds in a distinct area in a way that's fairly systematic from year to year. So it's not done as stringently as a breeding bird survey, for example, which is a driving route in which individuals will stop their car every half mile at predetermined stops, listen for 3 minutes, and count all the birds and individuals that you hear or see. So it's not that regimented. It gives a little bit more of a chance to freely search these large, vast areas for birds in well-known places, and to take walks in the woods and try to do things in a similar way each year. So not a perfect science, but when you put all of these trends together, you do get some really strong, scientifically sound results based on collectively doing this in a fairly systematic way over the years. So the strength of it is in the number of years that the Christmas counts have been running. I will mention that it's not held on Christmas Day anymore, and I'll talk about that Christmas word in a minute too, but initially in 1900 it was done on Christmas Day. Since then, thankfully, the conservation community has provided a little bit more leniency to observers, and there's a count period now for these Christmas counts to be conducted. It's between December 14th and January 5th every year. So that's about a 3-week period. It gives lots of opportunities to find a date that works for more people. So, National Audubon this year mentioned that they may actually be leaving out the word Christmas in the future. So they may be getting with the times and changing to be a little more inclusive. That's been a focus of National Audubon, as well as New Hampshire Audubon, and lots of other groups, and focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. So it seems like lots of groups are having a real moment for that right now. So anyway, stay tuned for that. Related to this topic of Christmas bird counts, I'll still call them that while they're still officially called that. I just participated in the Pittsburg Christmas bird count, Pittsburg, New Hampshire, that is. This is a count which I coordinate on the Canada border, the northernmost town of New Hampshire. It's the largest town and area east of the Mississippi River. So it's comprised of a large, vast area of woodlands, large lakes, impounded parts of the Connecticut River, which form the Connecticut River's headwaters. And if you haven't been to this part of the state, north of the White Mountains, you really owe yourself a visit there. It has a distinct geography, really fascinating and diverse natural areas, and a distinct culture. The birds can be quite exciting as well, even in the winter when things are a little quieter up there. In the summer, it is just full of birdsong. The boreal forest is really contained well within the boundaries of Pittsburgh and much beyond the borders. But New Hampshire's northern tip really gets into this northern boreal forest made up of spruce trees and fir trees and lots of other species that we have more in southern and central New Hampshire too. But it's just full of birds in the summer. It's really a breeding bird factory in a way. In the winter, though, things quiet down considerably. However, there are always a few prized gems to be found. Some of the true boreal forest birds as well. These ones are the crossbills, boreal chickadees, Canada jays, formerly known as gray jays, which are the camp robbers, familiar birds at campsites in northern New Hampshire, stealing food from people. But don't expect a lot of birds in the winter up here. However, there are still plenty of possibilities, and 11 observers on Tuesday went out in 5 different family groups or pods, because that's the real only safe way to do it this year on the Christmas bird counts. And we participated by car and by foot, walking and driving, and we tallied 36 bird species collectively on count day, and 2 additional count week birds, which are the 3 days before and the 3 days after the Christmas bird count. So some real goodies were found in there, including first count records for a couple of waterfowl species, since the lakes were still open, which is certainly not the case every year, but is more of a recent trend since we've been getting warmer late falls into early winter. So because climate change and other factors are facilitating this. So that's one thing that the Christmas counts can be notable for in our part of the world, where there's some transition happening at that time of the year. Chickadees, black-capped chickadees, as usual, were the most numerous, with over 300 individuals counted. But evening grosbeaks were not far behind this year, and there was a remarkable number of 281 this year. And this is that really spectacular, big, oversized goldfinch in a way. This is the evening grosbeak. They used to be really common in the 1990s, early 2000s, but then declined precipitously. They seem to be having some good years of late, and that could have to do with some factors that we've talked about on earlier programs here. The spruce budworm, which is a native pest in Canada, which is again taking off. In past years, the pest has been controlled in wide swaths, but now there's an abundance of this larval form of this insect pest that is feeding these evening grosbeaks. So it was really great to see a bunch of those recently, and they should be showing up at bird feeders near you this winter too. So keep on feeding sunflower, black oil sunflower especially. So let's talk about some other bird trends of this time of the year. So by mid-December, as Becky mentioned last week, migration has really come to a crawl at this point. But there's still a few northern species on the move. I'm thinking of snow buntings, snowy owls, rough-legged hawks. I'm still hearing about a few new snowy owls in the area. Apparently one in Keene, New Hampshire this week. Hopefully we'll find it on the Keene Christmas bird count on Sunday. A few late ducks are still on the move as ponds and lakes from north to south start to freeze up pretty rapidly now that it's cold. So, you know, going back to the Christmas bird count, it's a really useful census of birds, looking at all of this data that's compiled, because you're looking at a snapshot view of what winter is like in some areas. It's not winter in some of the southern towns where there may be migration still happening, especially well south of New Hampshire. Birds aren't quite in place for the winter in some areas still, but many birds at this time of the year are really here for the winter. So this time of the year is a really useful time to look at those trends. So I'll just mention, keep sending your questions my way. Plenty of good material to talk about, but questions from you or observations from what you've been seeing or noticing lately are certainly appreciated and welcome. And I'll put in a quick plug for New Hampshire Audubon's own analysis of bird populations, which will be coming out soon. This is the State of New Hampshire's Birds, first published by New Hampshire Audubon, first edition, quite a few years back now. But we are excited to be releasing that report again shortly. So stay tuned for this release in our social media feed and on our website, www.nhaudubon.org. Speaking of censusing and surveying, we wrapped up the season at the Pack Monadnock Raptor Observatory on November 20th. I believe the last time I spoke to the Facebook Live audience here was about the 19th, so I gave some updates. So just a quick summary of how the season went this year. We had 12,032 total raptor migrants flying past the Pack Monadnock summit in Peterborough, New Hampshire between September 1st and November 20th. So a pretty impressive number of migrants, 3/4 of which, as usual, were broad-winged hawks. This is the most common woodland nesting raptor in New Hampshire. So it's always great to see the broad-winged hawks migrate by. There were 3 days with over 1,000 broad-winged hawks in the air over the summit. So really amazing to know that this happens every year over our heads during a very specific time in mid to late September. So plan ahead next year. We also had high counts of 3 species of birds. Bald eagles continue to climb each year. This year they hit a high watermark of 185. Red-shouldered hawks, a more southern raptor, 223, that was their new record. And American Kestrels, giving us hope that this declining species may be starting to rebound, at least in some areas. Tiny little colorful falcon, 257 of those falcons this year. Attractive little bird here. Underside look, but the adult birds have reddish orange on the back. The males have bluish in addition to that, and they're little tiny things, just slightly larger than robins and blue jays. And they're mostly south of the border at this point for the year. Let's see. So that was, in all, we had 3 record highs. We also had a low record count for ospreys, which continue to seem to slide in our area. We're not exactly sure what population of ospreys is declining, because New Hampshire's seem to still be holding steady, or at least holding steady, perhaps still growing. So we could be seeing fewer from populations in eastern Canada or in Maine. That's the suspicion. Or they could just be finding a different route. That's a possibility too. The more we find out about raptors, the stronger this data gets. But for some of these species, it really is useful to have a transmitter tracking the locations of the birds, and the more records of those we get, the stronger our knowledge of raptor migration will get too. But anyway, more information about this project, which is a partnership with the Harris Center, New Hampshire Audubon, and New Hampshire Parks, is online. I wanted to post a link here, so bear with me. But we have now 16 years of data from of 15 different species of birds. So let's see here. Hang on a second while I attempt to post a link. Okay, I'm seeing a comment come in. Hang on a second. All right, link posted. Where do the raptors go? How far south? Asks Becky. So yeah, it depends. It really depends on the species. There are 15 species, as I mentioned, that we regularly count, and they all have slightly different wintering areas, different ranges altogether, and in some cases, the males and females end up in very different areas too. So it's very interesting. Raptor migration is you can't really put it in a box. It's a vast topic. So some species are maybe just moving slightly south of our border, in Massachusetts or into New York. These would be some of the local peregrine falcons that nest in New Hampshire. They don't tend to go too far. Some of our bald eagles go just south of our borders or stick around. A lot of them do stick around in the winter, as our winter eagles will, winter eagle surveys indicate later in the winter. And then some, like the broad-winged hawks and some of the other peregrine falcons that are migrating from further north in Canada, they may be going as far as south of the U.S. border. We know that broad-winged hawks are largely wintering in Central and South America, so their entire breeding population clears out of Canada and the U.S. and completely goes south of Mexico, really. So long journeys that take several weeks to get from point A to point B. In some case, a couple of months or longer. So we're hoping to have more information about broad-winged hawks in the future. Hawk Mountain in Pennsylvania is spearheading a project that is very exciting, that is placing transmitters on the broad-winged hawks and seeing how they migrate, where they winter, if they return to the same nesting sites. So hopefully New Hampshire will be featured in that project moving ahead. Let's see. So keep those questions coming. Great question, Becky. Yeah, so the snow. Getting back to the snow out our window here. I wanted to provide a few tips on getting outside to enjoy it on New Hampshire Audubon's wildlife sanctuaries. Many of our sanctuaries continue to be open in the snow. Not all of the traditional summer parking lots are plowed in the winter, though. So we are going to be posting some information about that shortly on the website. So stay tuned for that. Heavy snow can limit your options a little bit, but can also give you some new opportunities to explore, to find tracks in the snow, to move about a little more freely through the woods. So it's a fine time of year to get out there and explore. You can see the contrasts in the woods a little bit better than when everything was just brown in stick season a few weeks ago. Now that we have some snow on the ground, there's some new opportunities. Watching a chickadee just fly right past my window here. Sneak peek at what might be at the bird feeder. So a few of my top picks for where to explore this month on Audubon Sanctuaries. I'll just give a few that I know have had some recent attention and that should have available parking, at least on the roadsides. The Deering Wildlife Sanctuary in Deering is Audubon's second largest land holding at about 1,000 acres. And it's between Keene and Concord off the Route 9 corridor. And it's a great place to explore woodlands, fields, and lots of different types of beaver wetlands. There are complexes of beaver wetlands that include beaver ponds, beaver meadows, which are past beaver ponds that have grown in with vegetation, and lots of stream corridors connecting all of those. Lots of evidence of mammal sign. There are still a few moose in this landscape too, so you can find a variety of different mammal tracks in this area. A few other places are the very large Chase Wildlife Sanctuary in Hopkinton, which some Audubon volunteers, sanctuary stewards, have been recently bringing the trail system back to life a little bit. So it's, again, a place that is available for exploration, and this is off of Jewett Road in Hopkinton. Also large complexes of woodlands and wetlands, a place that you're pretty likely to have to yourself a lot of the time too. There may be roadside parking after a snow event like this, so stay tuned again for more updates on how to access some of these natural areas. And then one that I'll talk a little bit more about today is the Bellamy River Wildlife Sanctuary in Dover, close to the Route 4 bridge going over Little Bay. The Bellamy River is one of the several rivers that runs right into Great Bay and Little Bay. So it's tidal. It has brackish water where fresh and salt water come together. It's a small sanctuary compared to the last two that I talked to, which are many hundreds of acres. Bellamy River is only about 26 acres in size, but once you're there and explore the trail system, which is about 1.5 miles long, it really feels like you're in a much larger woodland area. Some of the trails go immediately along the Bellamy River and come out to the point where the river opens up into the Little Bay. It's an area that's rich with wildlife. There are eelgrass beds, there are shellfish beds in there, mussels, and you'll see a big tidal range, as you'd expect in an area that has no dams below that between the ocean and Bellamy River. So as a result, many types of ducks and waterfowl feed along the shoreline. It's a forest that's really dominated by oaks and white pines, so fairly typical in many areas, but there are a few other tree species that you'll find in there that may be harder to find elsewhere, like swamp white oak and black gum, and some really massive specimens of American beech trees, which are still fairly healthy looking on the trail that leads to the point. So you might be rewarded by having a beautiful walk there along the salt marsh edge. The snowy salt marsh scene is really worth a look if you haven't had to experience that in the winter. The salt marsh in winter is a beautiful place, and some of the areas are the first to melt off because of the tides coming in still. At some point that river may ice over, but right now it'll be wide open. There should be ducks like common goldeneyes, red-breasted mergansers, and buffleheads feeding offshore. I took a walk there a couple of weeks ago with my family. We saw a kingfisher that was rattling its call, flying right along the shoreline, looking for a small fish meal. So I just posted something on the Bellamy River here. I posted a trail guide to the feed here, so check that sanctuary out. And hopefully we'll get that plowed right after this snow. So that is a quick look at what's going on Sanctuaries. And now, before I take you outside for a quick look, let's take a look at some of the books that I'm featuring here. Since it's the holiday season, some of you are still looking for that perfect gift for the nature lover in your family. And the McLane Center in Concord, the McLane Audubon Center, is open this coming weekend, December 19th and 20th, Saturday and Sunday, from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. for in-person shopping. To ensure safety, we're limiting the number of people in the building, and masks are required. Visit newhampshireaudubon.org for more details. So here are several of my favorites, and many of these I know are in stock at the Audubon store, because some of these I've purchased there. All right, let's take a look. What do we have here? First one. Okay, maybe you can read this, maybe you can't. The Stokes Essential Pocket Guide to Birds of North America. It's a handy little guide that you could stick in your pocket. It's relatively thin, and it has, I've been referencing it as I've been talking here in the past half hour. It has photographs of some of the more common species, both west and east in North America. So it's not an East Coast only guide. It doesn't have every species, but it has a lot of the common ones that you'll see around the majority of where we live. So neat little book. So I happen to have lent out my favorite Bernd Heinrich book, Winter World, but this is another one that reminds me of Winter World, Summer World, talking all about the natural world and the summer. But if you can get your hands on a copy of Winter World, there's some excellent stories about species adapting to winter conditions in our area. Bernd Heinrich is a local author from Vermont. He's spoken at New Hampshire Audubon's annual meeting in the past. And I should mention Don and Lillian Stokes, also local New Hampshire authors who authored the Stokes Field Guide. Many popular books that they've written have to do with bird behavior and identification. It's not too soon to study your warblers for the spring. This is a hefty coffee table book, but also essential field guide component. I bring it on a lot of my nature tours that focus on warblers. The Warbler Guide by Stephenson and Whittle. It has everything from spectrograms, lots of different photos. It has plates of all the warblers together on 1 or 2 pages. So this is for the warbler fanatic in your life. It's an essential guide that has changed the way I look at warblers, which are one of my favorite groups of birds that are now gone for the winter. Another local author, Eric Masterson, used to work with New Hampshire Audubon, actually. Birdwatching in New Hampshire. This is Eric's book. Eric is still a volunteer on the New Hampshire Bird Records publication that Audubon publishes quarterly. Bird Records, by the way, is also a great idea for a gift subscription to Bird Records. So this has location information. It has some of the history of bird watching in New Hampshire, how to find birds. It has a few, it's like a site guide as well. Talks about some of the highlights seasonally. So, it belongs on every New Hampshire burger's shelf. Go through these kind of quickly now. Bringing Nature Home by Doug Tallamy, also a past annual meeting speaker. And he has written a lot about how to attract more wildlife to your own backyard. So winter is an excellent time to plan that right now. For every hawk lover, too, this is Essential Hawks in Flight by Dunne, Sibley, and Sutton. It has wonderful illustrations. It also has photographs. Actually, the new guide is mostly photographs now. But there are also lengthy text sections, and Pete Dunne has a way of really making raptors come to life in a way that no other author I know can. So it's a great way to learn all about raptors, not just identification, but a lot more than that. The Nature of New Hampshire by Sperduto and Kimball, a great guide that discusses all the different natural communities of New Hampshire. These are distinct natural areas, and it's a really in-depth book about having to do with plant life and geology. Really diving in. It's a kind of a deep dive book into some of the how to read and interpret the natural communities based on the plant life, and also some of the wildlife associations that are contained. And last but not least, an oldie but a goodie, Tracking and the Art of Seeing by Paul Rezendes. Still a classic. It's been around a while, but it features every species of mammal that you can find in eastern North America, and even those from the west and the north and the south in the United States, and ways to identify their sign, tracks, and just an understanding of their life histories too. So great time to study animal tracks in the snow. And speaking of the snow, as we wrap up here, I realize I've gone over a little bit, but let's take a quick look in the backyard. I'm hoping I got to any of the other questions that may have come in. So hang tight here while I bring you down the stairs and have a quick look at the bird feeders and the rest of my house on the way there. All right. Oh. Okay. Something in the snow there. Can you see? Okay. One bird on the ground at the moment is a dark-eyed junco. These are ground-feeding sparrows. It's leaving many tracks in the snow, but at the moment I'm hearing chickadees. They're not at the feeders right now. Can I zoom in? I can. So anyway, there's a look at the dark-eyed junco. Dark above, light below. Here's a chickadee coming in. So I'm still feeding sunflower, black oil sunflower, and also shelled sunflower. Both available also at the McLane Center this weekend. So if you need some bird seed, come stock up. So it's mostly chickadees, a couple of goldfinches, titmice, white-breasted nuthatches, the occasional woodpecker, and a beautiful snowy scene otherwise. Okay, hang on while I head back here. All right. Thanks for joining me on that quick look. Too close. Okay. And I'll wrap it up here by saying that I look forward to joining you again in January. I'll try to get here once a month and tell you all about what I'm seeing in the natural world, answering some of your questions about wildlife and birds. I'll share some other wildlife sanctuaries to visit and how to experience those. Answer your questions about what's happening in your own backyard, out your window. So that's all the time we have, but thank you for joining me and New Hampshire Audubon, and we appreciate your support during this holiday season. Everybody stay safe and enjoy the snow. Thanks a lot.